Recently, I was lucky enough to make a trip down to Hershey Park, and even more luckily, I got to ride every roller coaster that day. Welcome everyone, and today I'll be ranking Hershey Park's roller coasters. Starting off with number 14, we have Coco Cruiser. Coco Cruiser is a Zamperla gravity coaster which opened in 2014. There is really not much to say about this ride as it will do absolutely nothing for thrill seekers and can very easily be overlooked. It is still fun for what it is, but I cannot put it any higher. Number 13, Jolly Rancher Remix. Jolly Rancher Remix is a Vekoma boomerang placed right next to Storm Runner. And honestly, I hate Vekoma boomerangs. I always find a way to hurt my neck when the ride starts going backwards, and this Vekoma boomerang specifically made me nauseous for the next hour of my day. Maybe I am overreacting, but I personally cannot enjoy Jolly Rancher Remix. And also, the smoke tunnel did not do much for me either. It's a fun ride, I guess, if you like the idea of going backwards on a roller coaster, but it wasn't so fun for me. Anyways, moving on. Number 12, we have Trailblazer. Trailblazer is an aero mine train that, in my opinion, has been taken care of quite well. The ride is actually pretty smooth compared to what I have heard for other aero mine trains. Even though it is smooth, the transitions are your average aero transitions. The ride isn't really thrilling by any means, so I can't really say much more about this ride other than it is quite relaxing to ride this as it goes through the woods. Number 11, we have Wild Mouse. Wild Mouse is a Mock Rides Wild Mouse coaster, and before I get into the ranking, I really don't mind these Wild Mouse coasters. I enjoy the sharp turns and the occasional tiny drop, however, this is definitely a pretty standard Wild Mouse, and it's also pretty compact. It does have little hills, but there is no airtime, so those don't really do much for me. Other than that, it is a really nice ride and a good change of pace if you are tired of the bigger roller coasters. Number 10, Laugh Track. Laugh Track is a Mauer spinner that opened fairly recently in 2015. This is a pretty standard clone, but since this was my first Mauer spinner, I thought it was pretty cool. It really doesn't spin you around too much, so if you're worried about that, I wouldn't be. It didn't do anything too much, as it just kind of wraps around in on itself inside basically what is a giant box or warehouse. I did enjoy the cool theming hanging from the ceiling and the lights, because that definitely made the ride more interesting and fun. However, again, it still won't do much for you if you are a thrill seeker looking for intense rides. Number 9, Super Duper Looper. Super Duper Looper is a Schwarzkopf looper that opened in 1977, making it one of the very earliest looping coasters. Now, for a looping coaster, it is not very intense and usually serves as people's first looping coaster, which, to be honest, this is a very solid choice to be your first looping coaster. However, after the loop, that's pretty much where the intensity dies down, as the rest of the ride is just some slow turns and hills going around in the woods. Another unique thing about this ride is that it even goes back through its loop, which is cool to look at and experience. However, again, if you're looking for super intense thrilling rides, this is a step up, but definitely isn't close to Wildcat's Revenge or Storm Runner, which we will cover shortly. Number 8, Comet. Comet is a PTC wooden coaster that opened up back in 1946. This was the park's second ever roller coaster, and it definitely shows. It doesn't show in terms of, let's say, roughness, but like just how it looks and how the ride feels. Comet also has a very basic layout, in my opinion, with just some hills with basically no airtime, and some turns that are very, very trimmed. Don't get me wrong, this is still a fun ride, and I definitely still enjoyed it, and it is not a ride to just ignore on your trip to Hershey Park. Overall, fun ride, but I probably would skip it if I could. Number 7, Lightning Racer. Lightning Racer is a GCI racing wind coaster way in the back of the park. Lightning Racer definitely surprised me. I was 100% ready to put Lightning Racer towards the very bottom, and honestly, it was really fun, and definitely is where rides start getting a little more thrilling. The trains race alongside each other, then split off to meet up in turns and twists, then at the end they line up again and race side by side to the finish line. It is a great ride and has quite a bit of roughness to it, but in my opinion the roughness didn't really hurt the ride experience at all. This ride also never had a line the entire day I was at the park, and it was always a walk-on, so I got to ride both sides multiple times to make sure. Anyways, this was a fun ride and definitely something to try, but nothing too noteworthy. Number 6, we have Great Bear. Great Bear is a B&M inverted coaster. This ride looked super intense and super wild and out of control on the ride POVs, but it did not deliver to the expectation I had for it. Do not get me wrong, this is definitely a really intense and fun thrill ride, but it didn't do a whole lot for me. However, I did really enjoy going along the creek and the helix at the start for no reason other than it was cool and unique, I guess. After that, it is crammed in a pretty thin piece of land, and honestly, they executed it quite well. This ride was definitely worth waiting in line for, and I would ride it again if I had the option to. Number 5, we have Candemonium. Candemonium is a B&M hyper located right at the very front of the park and is probably going to be the first roller coaster you see. Now, I have heard a lot of people say Candemonium is forceless, and while it definitely doesn't have the strongest forces, where it really shined for me was the airtime. It definitely had some pretty fun airtime hills, and that first drop was awesome in the back row. Another highlight is basically the entire queue is covered and goes through a building. Maybe because I absolutely hate the heat and it was nice being able to get some shade from the sun. However, towards the end, the elements felt very, very filler and really didn't do a whole lot for me. Overall, Candemonium is a pretty graceful yet still thrilling ride, and honestly, in my opinion, could be the perfect first ride for you. Number 4, we have Fahrenheit. Fahrenheit is an Intamin looper located somewhat towards the back-ish area of the park. Of all the Intamin coasters I have seen and ridden, nothing compares or feels like this one. The vertical lift and the beyond vertical drop, especially in the back row, is one of the highlights of the ride. Another element I enjoyed was the Cobra roll, and one more highlight of the ride is the hill towards the end of the ride that gave some surprising ejector airtime. Overall, this is a great and very intense ride that thrill seekers will enjoy and coaster enthusiasts. I can't explain how fun this ride was, and it did not disappoint at all. You kind of just have to ride it to know what I'm talking about. However, the one thing I thought was kind of funny is that the ride kind of looks like Hot Wheels tracks to me, but that doesn't really matter too much to me, and it doesn't really take away from the experience. Just something I thought was funny. Anyways, moving on to the next ride. Number 3, we have Storm Runner. Storm Runner is an intimate accelerator located right next to Jolly Rancher Remix, with one of the fastest launches in the world going from 0 to 72 miles per hour in just 2 seconds, and the launch does not mess around. However, this is not the only highlight of the ride. The Flying Snake Dive was easily my favorite inversion in the entire park, and possibly in the world for me at the moment, which is just a heartline roll into a dive to the ground. Absolutely a great ride and one of a kind with a dynamic layout unlike Top Thrill 2 or the now destroyed King Dakar. Absolutely a great ride, however, the one thing that definitely hurt it is how short the ride experience is. It could be number 1 for me if it only had a little more to the ride, however, it does not, therefore it is stuck in 3rd place. Number 2, Skyrush. Skyrush is an Intamin hyper located right next to Comet. Skyrush reminds me a lot of Intimidator 305, which is now renamed to Pantherian over at King's Dominion. But to say it compares in intensity would be an insult to Intimidator, so I won't. Because, well, it really doesn't. Do not get me wrong, Skyrush has a beautiful first drop, especially in the back row, and the airtime hills were great. However, the restraints, they weren't that bad until we got into the layout. As soon as we get into the layout, you can start to feel the restraint tightening as you enter the high G-force elements, which definitely hurt the ride experience, but it wasn't anything too bad as long as you didn't initially staple yourself. The airtime hills were awesome, especially if you weren't stapled by the time you got to them. Other than that, I can't put this ride any higher or lower in terms of ride intensity and just the overall fun. And now for the number 1 roller coaster and number 2 overall for me, Wildcat's Revenge. Wildcat's Revenge is an RMC hybrid conversion of Wildcat that once sat in the plot of land Wildcat's Revenge sits in now. The first half of the ride is absolutely elite and alone would make this ride my favorite in the park. The first drop has great airtime, the underflip is just great and smooth, the first airtime hill is powerful and just packs airtime and quick inversions together perfectly. The second half is still really good, it just nothing compared to the first half. The airtime hill that kind of has that weird turn has absolutely beautiful laterals, and for these very reasons, this is the best ride in the park for me. If there's anything you would disagree with, please let me know in the comments, as I would love to hear your opinions about my list and Hershey Park as a whole. However, that will do it for today's video. If you did enjoy, please subscribe and like the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.